It's Ryan Ham here. If you know me and you know my videos, you know what's about to happen. I'm going to be reviewing and comparing these three here, and I'm not going to be reviewing the Beretta in comparison because most people aren't going to consider that to be an option when they're looking to purchase one of these three. And one of the distinguishing features of all three of these for me is, as you all know, I have suppressors, and I have several videos on suppressors, and I intend to have more on these three firearms with suppressors in the near future. The barrels are already threaded, but to have adapters that I could put on so I could attach my suppressor. I'm going to clear and rearrange the firearms, and then we'll go into the review. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, all three firearms are locked with the bolts in the open position. Now, these are all semi-automatic, magazine-fed 22 long rifles. Empty, also empty. I have cleared all of the magazines that are on the table so that we have no ammunition in the area. And now we can continue and act like real adults. We have the Ruger Model 2245 Lite, and this is a Mark III version, and those are easily distinguishable by the loaded chamber indicator slot on the side, whether or not it has a loaded chamber indicator, and a lot of people choose to remove those. Then we have, next, we have the Smith & Wesson M&P 22 Compact. It's been out for about 5 or 6 months, and I had to pick one up because they looked like a really good pistol, and we'll see whether that pans out as I review it. And then you probably have seen this one on my channel before. It's the Ruger SR22, and this is the smallest of the three. This one happens to have the threaded barrel, and that is the feature I looked for in it, and this was the first of the three that I bought, and it's the one that I've owned the longest. And for the purposes of this review, it's the only one that I've actually shot. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm not going to talk too much about accuracy or reliability. On the Ruger, it's configurable, so it has a large back strap and the extended floor plate. Everything you see here came from the factory, and I did have to change out the grip on this one from the original one, which was smaller in profile. And I did that because I have fairly large hands. And the extended floor plate, the other option is, if you see it here with the extended floor plate, let me take it out, put the other magazine in, and I'll show you. It's got the standard floor plate. Well, the standard floor plate is too small for my man hands, so I had to get the extended floor plate. They included both of those so that I could get a full 3 fingers, I guess, on the gun, and it does not stick out or uncomfortably dig into my hand there. The only problem with this, and I've gone over this before, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the hammer bites, and you can see it pinching the web of my thumb. Even with a normal grip, it bites and punches there. All three of these are hammer fired. The 2245 and the Smith & Wesson have internal hammers, and the SR22 has an external hammer. Well, they're all magazine fed. They all have a 10-round magazine. The design on the Ruger SR22 and the Smith & Wesson are similar. In fact, really similar. If you look at how the back of the magazine is with that cutout where the button is, the feed angles, the feed dynamics, almost everything about these is super similar, which leads me to believe that they might be made by the same outfit. I have no idea if that's true, but it would make sense. These both hold 10 rounds, and they have various protrusions for various reasons, and I'll go into that throughout the review. So try to keep them straight here. You can't lock the Smith & Wesson into the Ruger, and you can't actually get, with the button sticking out here, you can't actually get the Ruger into the Smith & Wesson. So the magazines aren't interchangeable, even though they're really similar. And on the Ruger magazine, it is considerably longer, and it has this funky floor plate on the end. I'll go into that in a bit when I go into ergonomics. And it seems to be of a different design, similar to the earlier Ruger Mark II pistol, from which this is descended. My first criticism of the Ruger 2245. First of all, the magazine goes in at an odd angle. So instead of inserting the magazine like this, like you would expect, it actually sits diagonal. That's because of the grip angle of the original Mark II versus the 45 1911, from which the grip angle on this was copied. So you have to insert the magazine strangely. Secondly, when you push in on it, and I did it there, you've got to be very careful when you're seating it to push forward when it gets all the way up to the top. It's all the way up to the top. I'm pushing as hard as I can up into the magazine weld, but I can't seat it doing that. I have to push forward, in which case it seats. One sure way of making sure that happens is by pressing your hand against there and just smacking it in, and then it locks. Not too big of a deal, but still kind of awkward. Second thing you'll notice is, well, it did at that time, but the magazine does not always drop free. That's because from here until it locks, there is a magazine safety that's pushing in on it that prevents it from actually seating properly, and it prevents you from just pushing the button and hoping it falls out all the way. Now, for some reason it's working now. It wasn't earlier. It was catching the magazine, and when I take the gun apart I'll demonstrate that. All three have got a rather tiny extractor. There's the extractor on the Smith & Wesson. Let me get my magical Kel-Tec pointer. There's the extractor here on the Ruger 2245, and on the SR22, which seems to have the largest and beefiest extractor right there. The trigger safety on the Smith & Wesson is what sets it apart from the other two, where it's got an M&P. Of course, it is an M&P 22 compact, but it's got an M&P style pivoting trigger. So that is the trigger safety, and as you pull that, it disengages the safety. If you try to pull from the upper part, it will not discharge, but from the lower part it does easily. So I'll start with the 2245. So the controls on this are fairly simple. Just like a 1911, you've got the magazine release here, which we've already gone over. Push it, the magazine comes out at an odd angle. The slide release is here, and the safety is here. It's got one more feature. It has a safety here with a key, so you can put it on safe and engage the trigger lock or safety lock, the internal safety lock here, by just turning it like that, and then the gun is essentially locked in the safe position, so you can't fire it, but you could still withdraw the slide and extract a cartridge if it's in there. So the advantage to this is that it can be imported into California in this configuration. It's got a magazine safety, it's got a loaded chamber indicator that pops up there and tells you that maybe the chamber is loaded, even though I'm activating it now. So it says loaded chamber, but it's obviously not loaded because I'm just pushing my thumb on it. And then it's got this fancy key. And this is considered a child safety lock. So the advantage to the safety lock, the external key lock, is that we all know that the gun is more safe if you have the key lock feature, because no child ever in the history of childhood has enjoyed playing with keys. They avoid them like the plague, and that means that these guns are absolutely safe if you use the key to lock the gun up to prevent children from playing with them. No child ever has enjoyed playing with keys. So that's a wonderful safety feature. We'll hope that more guns in the future come with a key lock, and maybe we'll save a few children's lives. I'll move on. Magazine safety. What does the magazine safety do? Well, the magazine safety and the loaded chamber indicator, as I mentioned earlier, have everything to do with politicians in California writing a law with no concept or no clue about gun design that basically said that in order to import a firearm into California by 1993 94, 95, somewhere around in that time frame, that they had to have first a magazine disconnect and second a loaded chamber indicator. But in order to import a firearm into California, you have to have both. So what that does is that excludes guns that were designed before that didn't have to have those. So Ruger had to retrofit and add the magazine safety, magazine disconnect, and the loaded chamber indicator, as well as a keyed lock in order to be able to sell their guns in California. So this gun in North Carolina is a hunk of junk. It serves absolutely no purpose to have a magazine safety, a loaded chamber indicator, or this stupid key lock thing that's going to save 1 billion children's lives over the next 5 years. The safety, of course, being back here, adjustable sights. All three have adjustable sights. There's virtually no difference between them. All three have a fixed front sight, with the exception of the Smith & Wesson and the SR22. They both have drift adjustable front sights. What that means is you can set the drift adjustment on your rear sight to the center, then adjust the front sight for point of impact, and then all you're doing is adjusting elevation on your rear sight. Of the three sights, I prefer the Ruger the most, even though the front isn't drift adjustable. The Ruger 2245, that is, because the spring tension on this is fairly stiff, and it seems like a better, more robust design. And in fact, it is a real similar, if not identical, design on their heavier revolvers. So that's what we get with the 2245 Lite. Okay, we'll go into the controls on the Smith & Wesson. This one shines in terms of controls. It has got a safety here that feels really positive. If anybody's ever felt the safety on the original M&P 22, not the compact, the original ones, the ones that are made in Germany, they will know that the safety feels really mushy and like junk. This one does not. I am really happy with this safety. Fully ambidextrous for those left people. And the trigger, of course, is fully ambidextrous. The magazine release, I do not know. I haven't read the manual specifically to figure this out, but I think it is reversible because it's got catches on both sides, and the button outline here and here are identical, so it should be reversible. And the slide lock is the only thing that's not reversible, or not ambidextrous. Also, the takedown lever, of course, you don't need those two to operate the gun. The intent of the slide lock is to lock the slide back. When you insert a new magazine, and I'll simulate by taking this magazine out. When you put in a new magazine, your training should be to pull back and let go of the slide. And that is how you should train with this, and that's how it allows you to train. If you try to lock back the slide and release it with the slide release, it is very, very difficult with that nearly flush lever to hit that. There's no real positive gripping surface. You can do it, as I just demonstrated, but it's real difficult. So there's also a key lock on this, and it works the same way. You put the safety up, and it exposes a hole with which you use your child-friendly key to insert in there, and it locks the gun in the safe position. Once it's in the safe position, you can still pull back the slide, and you can check the chamber and everything. This gun has a magazine safety as well. I'll call it a magazine disconnect. When the magazine is out of the gun will not function, because this fancy little lever sits in the gun like this, and it engages that little slot on your magazine, that little projection there, and it pushes up, and it engages your trigger mechanism, so it'll work. With the gun out, it pushes down. Funny thing is, this thing is super easy to remove, and when it's removed, it basically disables the disconnect feature, and the gun works like every other gun in the world. Magazine disconnects can fail. They can be removed. And if you, in your mind, get in the habit of thinking the gun is safe with the magazine removed, then you're going to hurt somebody. Other than that, the slide is actually pretty easy to pull back on. If you're worried about having weak hands and not being able to pull back on the slide, it's not like a... Let's see, I'm trying to figure out about how much force it is. It's about 7 or 8 pounds, I'm guessing, just kind of the force that you'd need to lift a gallon of milk by the handle. Okay, on to the SR22. The SR22 is the odd duck. The other guns, you push the safety up to engage it. This one, you push it down to engage it. You see the red paint goes away and is hidden by the safety. And when the safety is down, you can still pull back on the slide, still function it just fine, except the gun will not go off. In fact, the trigger just is really slack and doesn't do a thing. So that's the safety on that gun. The slide release is fairly large, protrudes significantly further out than the one on the Smith & Wesson. The safety is ambidextrous. I didn't notice, or if you notice, it's not ambidextrous on the Ruger, and there's almost no way to make it that way. They may in the future, but it doesn't seem from looking at the internals that there'd be a way to do that. It's fine if you're a left-handed person. Disengage it or engage it with your thumb on your strong hand, or just be like other people and use the weak hand to engage it and disengage it. The hammer is external on this, so you can cock it. However, it is very difficult to get the right leverage on here. These little cuts in the back of the hammer do almost nothing to help you grab onto the hammer. By the time you're back here, you're actually grabbing on the top of the hammer, and it really doesn't help. A very poor design if you want to cock the hammer. So my opinion is, don't touch the hammer at all. Just use the slide to cock it like a traditional concealed hammer or internal hammer gun like either of these, or a striker fired pistol. Just don't even bother with it. You'll notice that the safety, when you put it on, drops the hammer, and it drops it safely. The gun won't fire when you do that. Now, this one, the Ruger SR22, also has a magazine safety or a magazine disconnect. The difference being, when you pull that one out, it completely disables the trigger. So the trigger spring is somehow interacting with the magazine disconnect, the trigger return spring. It's just really mushy and funky when you do that. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not a bad feature. That's a really good way to notice when you go to take up the slack on your trigger that it feels almost non-existent. There's no return spring or anything like that. That's an oh darn, I forgot to put my magazine in. You put it in and it immediately engages the trigger. I'll do that again. As you put it in, it immediately engages the trigger return spring. This is a double action, so that means you pull the trigger and it will go off every time. So if you have a .22 long rifle shell that doesn't go off, you can pull the trigger again and the hammer will follow every time. If you have a strike on a primer that doesn't work, you can double strike it, and if it still doesn't go off, just simply rack the slide. One interesting thing about the Ruger magazine release is, if you're a lefty, it's ambidextrous, so you can use your strong hand to release the magazine. The SR22 is the only external hammer pistol. It is the only one without the funky key lock system, and it has a loaded chamber indicator that is basically a hole in the top right above the barrel there. If you look down in there and see anything, that means it's loaded. The problem with that is, if it's really low light, I hope you've got like a very bright light in order to check to see if it's got anything in the chamber or not. Same thing with the Smith & Wesson, but the Smith & Wesson has got a very large opening. You can see there's no brass down there. Obviously, these are unloaded. It gives you a viewing port. At least it's an indication that it's loaded without having to do anything to the gun, like, I don't know, handle it, press check it a little bit, like every other person is trained to do with their firearms. And again, if there's a loaded chamber on the Ruger, it'll stick that little lever out and say loaded chamber unless it's broken or removed or disabled. The SR22 comes with, again, with the large and small grip. It also comes with a threaded adapter, so you can mount your silencer on there, and a wrench to take it off. It comes with your different base pads. These come installed, the small ones, and the large ones will be in a package, and you can swap them out real easily. In fact, let me demonstrate how to do that with the magazine out of the gun. You just insert this tool here, push down on that button, hold your thumb over the bottom, and then take it off. watch this because it's going to fly out on you. And then you just put the new one on like that, push down on that little button and slide it on. That's what all comes with the SR22, which I found to be the best equipped of the three pistols. The only negative I could see on this, again, is that it bites my thumb. I don't much like that. And I don't care for a magazine safety, but it's pretty unobtrusive in this case. Your magazine drops free every time, which it doesn't with the 2245. So I'm okay with the magazine safety system on this one. The loaded chamber indicator is passive, so I'm okay with that. Overall, decent design. I'm pretty happy with it, actually. Now, to disassemble these guns, the first step, of course, is to clear them all, and I'll go ahead and do that again. Magazine out and away. And on this one, I have to take the magazine out, but once I take the magazine out, I have to put it back in and take it out and put it back in a couple of times in order to get the darn thing disassembled. The 2245 Lite is a pain to take apart. I'm going to check to see if it's empty. It's empty. Close the slide, and I'm going to leave the magazine in, and I'm going to pull the trigger with it pointing in a safe direction. So you pull the trigger once. Now I'm going to take the magazine out. Now I'm going to take this little lever here and flip it down. Sometimes you could do that with your thumb. Other times you need a screwdriver. Just use something that's non-marring so you don't scratch up the back of your gun. You pull it out. You want to pull it out to about there. Don't pull it all the way out like that. Pull it out to about there, and then pull down on your pin, and that's this pin here. And the reason you don't want to pull it all the way out is because when you pull that and it breaks free, you don't want to mar up the back of your grip frame here. So with that piece out, you have to hold the gun upward, pull the bolt out, and then the hammer, it's basically disassembled at that point. And then what you want to do is you want to hold the gun and hold the gun so you've got both the grip frame and the top loosely, and tap on the back of the receiver there. And then when it's far enough forward, and I heard it break loose, when it's far enough forward, it just lifts off. So there you go, that's how you do that. And now this is disassembled. So I'm going to keep the magazine here, which I don't normally do, but you have to with the Ruger in order to reassemble it, but I'll keep the magazine in the area. This one is fairly simple. I've got it locked back, so you just push that lever down. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it's very hard to push up for me, but just push it down like that, and then pull back on the slide a little bit further, and then lift up. And once you lift up, you can clear the barrel and pull it all the way off, and then there's a spring assembly that drops out the front like that. That's the Smith & Wesson, and same thing on the Ruger, with the exception of, let's close it here, with the exception of you have to have this little lever thing that you just pull down with your thumbnail. You pull it out of the way, and once it's clear, then you pull back on the slide, lift up, and then let it go forward. And we've got the magazine spring, the slide, and everything. Let me rearrange things. I'll be right back. Okay, if you are keen of eye, you will notice right off the bat that all three guns are not alike. These two are fairly similar in design, but the Ruger has a separate barreled action system here with the bolt in the back. Let's go ahead and view the internals on all these, and I'll show you the individual parts as best I can and describe what they do. So here's the trigger on the Ruger 2245 Lite, and as you can see, you pull it, and then it draws this bar here forward. You see how it's drawing that bar forward? Well, it'll draw it more if the magazine safety is up where it is when it's meant to be fired. So that draws that forward. What that does is you can see this little piece down in here, a little tiny shiny piece maybe. There it is. It's shining right there. When you pull the trigger, it pivots that piece forward. See that shiny piece pivoting forward? That piece engages with the hammer, so if it's got a magazine in it, which it doesn't, which means I have to demonstrate by using all three of my hands and pulling up on the magazine safety. There you go. You pull the trigger, it moves the seater forward and lets the hammer fall. Okay, so that's the system there. Slide lock just pops up there. See if you can see that. slide lock just pops up there, and it pops in front of the slide, and where it latches is right there. So it'll stop the slide right there. And when it's down, it lets the slide go forward. The magazine safety I've already demonstrated, but let me show you with the magazine in, that as you push up on the magazine, that little magazine safety lever right there moves out of the way, and it kind of wedges behind the magazine. When you move the magazine safety out of the way, there's a little kind of a catch that stops the sear. So if the magazine is not in, the safety, or the magazine safety, drops down and prevents the sear from moving out of the way, which locks the hammer back, and it makes it perfectly safe in California. The safety does the same thing on the opposite side of the frame, where it drops down in front of the sear. Safety on, safety off. So no matter whether the magazine disconnect is engaged or the manual safety is engaged, that sear will not move anywhere. If the sear doesn't move anywhere, the hammer will not fall. It is just literally locked solid in there. The lock here, basically it just puts a bolt in front of the safety to keep the safety from moving. Alrighty, so let's move on. Smith & Wesson is different, but not by much. As you're pulling the trigger, the sear, which is right there, and it is engaging on the hammer. And when you pull the trigger, as I will here, the sear moves like that. See it? See that little nub? It'll be right there. See that little nub coming back from the drawbar? See it? See it keep on popping up in there? That's just engaging and touching the sear, and then it pushes the sear back. The sear's got a little claw that comes over the top and engages with this surface, the sear surface on the hammer, which is probably pretty rough, which is why I'm having issues with that little hitch in the trigger. And it releases it. So that does not happen if the magazine disconnect, which sits right down roughly in there. That does not happen if the magazine disconnect is in the down position, because it disables the trigger bar. The slide rides on these two rails back here, which gives it support in the back, and in the front it rides on the barrel and on this little barrel nut here, on the end of the barrel, which is belled. It's a little bit larger diameter than the rest of the slide. So it rides on those three areas. If you remove the barrel nut, which I've seen people do, if you remove the barrel nut, it's on loose because I have a suppressor attachment. What will happen is, there we go. What will happen is the slide can move up and down. That is 100% perfectly normal. Don't look at that and think it's flawed, but there are no front rails on that, and that engaging the nut, the bell on the inside of the slide engages the nut, and that's what keeps it steady. So as it goes back a little bit, it's actually just a little bit loose on the slide, you can see, and then everything else operates as you would expect. If you've got the barrel nut on like you should, everything works just fine. The barrel nut here is the front guide rail equivalent on a normal, like a Glock or the standard M&P series. So there you go for that. There's this little nub here, that little projection. Get it to focus a little bit. That little projection that moves with the trigger. What that does is that engages a plunger here. See the plunger there? Pushing it down. And that is a hammer or a firing pin block safety. So if you don't have the trigger back, then that plunger won't go down and the firing pin will not move forward. It's a very good safety feature. It's been on guns for 100 years now. That is a firing pin block safety. The slide on this is aluminum, and this is just laser etched through whatever coating is on the aluminum. But the breech block itself, from here to here, is steel, And that's where that roll pin comes in. That roll pin holds that steel block in place, and then it's keyed up here. So it's actually pretty strong. So the breech face itself is going to be solid steel, and it looks like a good quality machining, or maybe it's cast. I don't know, but it seems like a good quality. And because the slide is aluminum, they insert this little steel pin here, and that little pin is where the little nub on the slide lock, that little nub at the back right there, that engages with your steel slide lock, and it stops the slide, so you're not wearing steel on aluminum, which would be very bad. Remington. This whole block back here is steel, so if you happen to dry fire it somehow accidentally, it's coming down on solid steel, so it'll absorb whatever recoil there is. The barrel block is steel, and the barrel is solid steel for the whole profile up to, of course, where the threaded portion is, unlike the M&P 22, the original M&P 22. So I think all I need to show you now is the magazine release. And if you look down there, let's see if I can get you a better shot. There you go. If you look down inside of there, you can see that the magazine release moves. There you go. Moves, and there's that little pin sticking up that's under spring pressure. And I guess you could take that out and move it around. The manual will tell you how to do that. I just don't know how right now. I don't need to know how because I am right-handed. Okay. The safety itself, the safety mechanism. I'll turn that light off because I think you get better light here. The safety mechanism is steel. You see, it's got these little plastic projections, but those are just overmolded into the steel, and it's actually all steel that goes up in there, which is good. Makes it more robust and more durable. And finally, let me cock that. And finally, the ejector is a very weak looking, but it's actually very strong stainless steel stamping right there. And it's replaceable if need be. Accessory rails on the front for whatever, like laser or flashlight you want. And that's pretty much all there is to know about this. I think I have covered everything. I don't know what those little golf ball dimples are. You know, you see them here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Might be for balance. I don't know what those dimples are for. It's if anybody could tell me, just leave a comment down in the comment section. All right, so let's move on to the other gun. I know this is running long, but if you're still with me, take a breath. You could pause the video at any time, go to the bathroom. If you have to go to work, come back, whatever. Now on to the Ruger SR22, which looks magically very similar to the other gun that we just looked at, the Smith & Wesson M&P 22 Compact. Very similar in a lot of ways. The barrel is held on with a bolt, Allen head bolt right there. You've got, again, the disassembly lever here, the trigger, slide release, safety that goes backwards, ejector. This lever back here appears to engage the drop safety right there. And you've got the extractor here, goes around the case. Again, this is the same concept. You've got the roll pin back here holding the steel block in here, and the only difference is this is open at the back, whereas the Smith & Wesson was closed at the back. Well, let me show you the threaded end of the barrel here, which I've showed you on the other two. The Ruger and the SR, or the SR22 and the Smith & Wesson are real similar. There's the threaded barrel there. It's got a little washer that keeps it from loosening there. Okay, there you go. Well, hope this has been enlightening so far. I'm going to go ahead and put them together. One other thing I forgot to show you was the Ruger 2245 Lite comes with a scope rail. The others, of course, are very difficult to mount scopes on if you wanted to do that. I'll go ahead and put them back together and we'll have some final thoughts. And we're back. So of the three pistols, the one that I like the least at this time is the 2245 Lite. It's just got the magazine safety, the loaded chamber indicator, the key lock, and the odd way the magazine works compared to a normal gun are just, they're more for a more advanced person, somebody who's got a little more experience, where we could take the darn loaded chamber indicator out, where we could take the magazine disconnect out, where we can completely ignore the safety key that no children will ever want to play with, and where we could fix the trigger wobble issue, and I'll go into that in another video. Once you do all that, the gun will be fine. But until then, I can't really recommend this for purchase. I bought it knowing that it had defects, and I'm going to fix those. But for the price, the cheapest of the three is actually the best. That's the SR22. This is the one I would recommend for most people, except people with gargantuan webbed hands, like myself. If you've got very large hands, or if you've got a webbed hand, or if you've ever been bit by a hammer or a slide, this one will bite you as well. It did me. Otherwise, the Ruger's got a pretty unobtrusive magazine disconnect, a non-existent or hardly existent loaded chamber indicator, and ambidextrous magazine release and safety. Smaller, better handling. It was really accurate and really reliable as I shot it. Configurable for smaller hands. It's just a better gun overall. The only reason I'm not at this time saying that the Smith & Wesson M&P 22 Compact is better is because, first, it's currently more expensive, but probably in the future that price will come down to be roughly competitive between the two. But also the horrible trigger pull compared to, well, pretty much anything. It's one of the worst trigger pulls I've ever felt out of the box. It's just horrible. And for a suppressed pistol, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be my go-to gun once I get the trigger figured out. Overall, I like all three guns. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put them side by side and give you kind of a comparison on length, the width, height, and all that stuff. You can see that the Ruger, the SR22, is in a size class below the M&P 22 Compact, but not by much. They're fairly similar height-wise. They're fairly similar width-wise. The 2245 Light is much larger, but that's mostly in length. Height is only a little bit larger. Let me look at all the guns back to back so you can see they're all similar width. The M&P 22 Compact is actually slightly, it seems to be slightly narrower, and it does feel narrower. And I think of the three guns, it's got the best feel. It's got that beaver tail that comes up in the back and makes your grip. You can see identical beaver tails, but there's no hammer sticking out to bite you. Accessory rail on the Ruger, similar if not identical to the Smith & Wesson here. Identical capacity, roughly similar safety features, configurable with the SR22. The M&P 22 Compact has a bad trigger, but otherwise not too bad a gun. And of course the 2245 is kind of a work in progress. Of all things, I think it's got the best inherent accuracy because the frame, the sights, and the barrel are all in one solid unitary piece. I doubt anybody's watched this all the way to the end and is going to put anything negative down in the comments. I'm a person, these are opinions. Some of them are facts, but most of it is just my opinion. If you disagree with me, please put it in the comments and I'll try and explain why you're wrong and I'm right. Please like, favorite, subscribe, share, comment. It's Ryan Ham. Enjoy.